This is the Read, Write, and Create podcast, the podcast where you get a bite-sized session of creative writing coaching from me, Lori L. Tharps. I'm a journalist and a former tenured college professor who moved to the south of Spain so I could live a global literary life. I'm also an award-winning author of both fiction and nonfiction who believes in the transformative power of a story well told. I created this podcast because I want to help as many BIPOC writers as possible get their stories out of their heads and into the world. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, wordsmiths, storytellers, and scribes. I am back with another exciting episode for our special Behind the Book season of the podcast. Remember, this season, instead of speaking with legendary authors, we're speaking to people who work in the book business, people whose livelihoods depend on the free-flowing circulation of books in the world. People who believe in the very marrow of their beings that books are both sacred and necessary. People like today's guest, Regina Brooks. Regina Brooks is the founder and CEO of Serendipity Literary Agency in New York. Serendipity is the largest African-American-owned agency in the United States, and Regina has represented and established a diverse base of award-winning clients in adult and young adult fiction, nonfiction, and children's literature. Her authors have appeared in USA Today, the New York Times, the Washington Post, as well as on broadcast outlets including ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN. Currently, Regina is the president of the Association of American Literary Agents, and she's also a founding member of the Literary Agents of Change and the Black Book Accelerator. Regina is also an author, and she has written books including Writing Great Books for Young Adults, Everything You Need to Know from Crafting the Idea to Getting Published, and You Should Really Write a Book, How to Write, Sell, and Market Your Memoir. Prior to her publishing career, Regina Brooks worked as an aerospace engineer and made history as the first African-American woman to receive a Bachelor's of Science degree in aerospace engineering from Ohio State University. As if that isn't already an exciting enough background, Regina is also an airplane pilot and the co-founder of Brooklyn Aviation. When she's not working as a literary agent, Regina loves gardening, fishing, and flying her own airplane. Let me tell you, you guys are in for a real treat with this episode because Regina is as exciting as her backstory would imply. And during our conversation, Regina gives us a real behind-the-scenes look of life as an agent, and she really offers some actionable advice and tips for writers who are trying to get an agent and for authors who are trying to build their platform and community. Suffice it to say, Regina drops some real gems throughout this episode. I'm telling you, you might want to take notes. It's that good. Welcome to the Read, Write, and Create podcast, Regina Brooks.
Hello. Thank you for having me here, Lori.
Well, I'm so glad you are here. I'm so excited for you to join us and be our last but most inspiring guest on this season of the podcast. So the first question I always ask our guests is, why do you think books are important in society?
When I think about how information is passed down from generation to generation, it's a way to pass down knowledge. It's a vessel for culture. It's a way to make sure that our histories and our voices aren't forgotten. It's a way for storytelling and a way to kind of make sure that people connect. And I think more important is it's a way for people to teach others information and escape and entertain. I mean, there's just so many reasons why books are important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So obviously you're here because you think books are important. It's what your life work is about at this point. But I do know that you started your career as an aerospace engineer. And so I was just wondering if you could share, how does one go from aerospace engineer to running the largest African American literary agency in the United States? Can you just take us a little bit on the journey to how you landed to being the literary agent?
I'll give you the short answer to this one. I graduated from Ohio State University as the first African American woman to graduate with a degree in aerospace engineering. And at that time, I was like, I want to be an astronaut. And I was working at NASA. And my mentor there suggested that if I really was interested in becoming an astronaut, that I would need to go back and get a specialized degree. So that's what my goal was to do. And I had a summer off before graduate school. And I took a publishing program at Howard University. At that time, Howard University Press still existed, and they had a summer institute. And for me, it was just a way to I've always been interested in words, and I used to write poetry and always interested in the arts. And I was like, before I start this kind of intense program, I just want to do something light and creative. And I started in that program and then realized, oh, wait, there's a whole lot more to publishing than just writing a book. And at that time, they had a lot of publishing professionals come in and kind of talk about the business of publishing. And I met numerous people. And one of the people that I met was the president of John Wiley & Sons. And I decided that I was going to go into sales. It was like, okay, let me just for just a second, put this off. And I did that with the idea that it was just going to be kind of temporary. And I loved it. And I started out in publishing in the sales in the DC, Maryland, Virginia territory. And then after 9 months, they moved me to New York and I became an editor, which is very unheard of. But I was working in a category, I was doing engineering and computer science books. And it was during the time, it was right before the .com craze. And so the publishing company at that time only had 2 computer science books, and it was one in Pascal and one in Fortran. And my goal was to kind of expand that entire list out, and that's what I did. And then I moved from Wiley over to McGraw-Hill. So I moved from building out kind of a higher ed program into a trade program. And at that time, a lot of the big companies started to have certification programs. So Microsoft had a certification, Cisco, Nortel. And so I built up a program for people who wanted to self-study for these exams to get certified. And then I was kind of watching how much money I was, as an editor, how much money I was giving these writers. And I was thinking to myself, oh my goodness, and agents were shopping these books to me. And I was thinking, if I were on the other side, I could be making 15% of what I'm giving these folks. And also, I was thinking about the idea that I wouldn't necessarily be pigeonholed into just doing tech and science books, because I've always had an interest in a myriad of things, not just tech and science, which I love, but I wanted to do other things as well. So that was kind of the trajectory. And so I left McGraw-Hill and I started my agency 25 years ago.
That is so exciting and so interesting. I'm curious because a lot of people get into the literary agency business, and I've heard many stories of people who are like, oh, they're not in it anymore. They couldn't hack it. They couldn't handle it. It's a hard business. And not only are you recognized as having the largest African-American literary agency in the U.S., but you've been around for 25 years. What's the secret to your success?
Yes, people come in and people come out. And I've had agents who've worked with me who were working their butt off and really, really were invested in this business. But living in New York and how the business model of agenting works, it's a very tough gig. And I wish authors understood that a little bit more and had a little bit more patience with that, because we're working just as hard as you are because we're trying to make a living. But I will say that what is the secret to my sauce? I'm a workaholic, unfortunately. And I'm also very much driven by my authors, and I love the idea of being able to clear a pathway to making them successful. It's the only thing really that keeps you going, because it's definitely not the money. It's definitely not the money that's the driving force. You have to be wedded to the authors, to their vision, because the business realities as it relates to agenting is very, very tough. And it's tough for BIPOC agents, and it's tough for mainstream agents too. And if you follow publishing at all, there's lots of ebbs and flows. There are times when publishers are really interested in authors of color, and then it kind of wanes. And then there are times when they're like, give me a book, give me a book, give me a book. And then there's like, oh yeah, no, I can't sell that. Oh, so you have to be able to kind of stay the course and also have a balanced portfolio of books that you're working on.
Yeah, I noticed that just looking at the list, the types of authors that your agency represents, I'm always struck by how diverse your list is. Because a lot of times you'll see agents or agencies that are like adult books, or they're just kids' books. You know what I mean? But you have a little bit of everything, or a lot of bit of everything. But I think that's really unique. And I was wondering if you might expand on that, because maybe that's part of the sauce. Like you said, you're not just repping one type of author. What's your thought process on that, of diversifying in terms of you as an agent?
I'm definitely interested in a diverse type of book, and I'm a generalist. When I first started agenting, my goal was to bring out a lot of science fiction books, because it's a natural to me. I have a science background, and I was like, I'm going to represent science fiction books. And then I started reading the books, and they're like 1,000 pages because the people have to set up the world. And especially at that time, it was a very niche audience. So depending on how fast you read, in order to get those books read, find the ones that you're interested in, and then try to pitch and sell them, it was taking forever. And so I realized, okay, I have to be very strategic about this. And I have to look at this process in two ways. One, most agents are driven and they pick up books and they're interested in books that they themselves are interested in reading. It's driven by their own passions and things that they like. And then there are agents who look at the books that they're working on from a business perspective. Is there an audience for the book? And am I able to get this book to a publisher? And is the publisher and the author able to get the book to the audience? And then the third thing for me is I think about one of the things that's just very much a part of my personality is I'm just curious. I love learning new things. I love being around and learning from smart people, best in class, experts, authorities. And it doesn't really matter what the category is. If you have something to say and you are able to do it in a way that is digestible and accessible to an audience, and you know who that audience is, I can package you and sell your project. So as an agent, I find myself wanting to have my finger on the pulse of a number of different audiences. So I travel a lot, and I'm trying to get a sense of, what are people thinking about right now as it relates to money? What are they thinking about as it relates to religion? What are they thinking about as it relates to new age ideas? I'm trying to keep my finger on the pulse of what's in the zeitgeist. And that kind of drives me. And so as a result, I'm a generalist. And if I think the idea is good and I think the author can deliver a product that audiences will resonate with, I'm all for it. And I have to have a balanced portfolio. So if I have 10 books that I'm representing, there may be one or two books that are kind of passion projects where I'm like, I just love this project. I don't know if it's going to sell any books, but I just am so wedded to this. And then I have the other 9 or 10 where I already know who the audience is. I know what editors might be interested in buying the book. I know that when the book comes out, the author can really tap into their audience. So really, it's about having a balanced portfolio.
This is so fascinating because most writers, we don't really know the strategy. We don't know what agents are really doing. We so often think about them as this otherworldly figure that's going to change our lives and don't realize Y'all are got your own bills to pay, strategies to make, and how you're thinking and approaching your business, your list. This is such good information, and I'm so glad people are able to hear what agents actually have to think about as they build their list.
Can I share one other thing that I think might be helpful for your audience? As I'm building my list, I'm thinking, I used to teach a course at Harvard to doctors who were interested in writing books. It kind of disbanded because of COVID, but for 15 years, doctors from around the world would come, and it was a CME course. They got credit for it, and they would learn what it really takes to get a book published. And that was a source for me of finding experts who were interested in writing books about diseases, different topics that they were working on. So as an agent, as much as people are sending me projects, I'm also going out and trying to create opportunities for people to be able to bring projects to me in a very specific way on very specific topics. So if you're an author and you're writing in a category, you kind of need to be in that community of whatever that category or topic is, and it makes it easier for an agent to find you.
Good tip. I hope everybody heard that. A lot of times we want to stay hidden. We don't want to tell anybody what we're writing about. You can't be found if you're not out there. Miss Regina just said so.
Well, you can't be found. And also, oftentimes, even if your book gets published, your book won't be found because the books have a community too. So people will say, oh, what are the best books on X, Y, and Z? I had a publicist call me today asking me about some of the top books on fashion. And she reached out to me because her expectation is that I would know what are some of the top books on fashion. So I started thinking about, who are the authors writing on fashion and where are they writing about? So you kind of got to be in the community in order for people to know who you are and know what you're writing about.
What do you wish more BIPOC authors, particularly, that's who's listening right now, what do you wish more of them knew about preparing themselves to present to an agent so that they are the best possible product, if you will? Let's assume the writing is already good. Let's not assume that they need a writing lesson. What should authors be really doing so when they come to the agent's like, but of course, I want you.
One of the challenges I would say to my business is there are so many really great writers, but there aren't as many great authors. Being a great author is having the business aspects of being a writer all wrapped into one. And so there are a lot of things I encourage writers to do to make themselves authors. I would say the first thing is really have a strong sense of who your audience is. And, that sounds very generic, like, know who your audience is. But it's not easy to do. You think, okay, well, I have 100,000 followers on social media. Yeah, but they might not be readers. And a lot of them aren't. Even if they are readers, they might not be book buyers. You need to know who the book buyers are in that 100,000 people who are following you. And you have to be in community with those folks in order to get them attracted to your work. So number one is know who your audience is. And not only know who they are, but know what's going to move them. Know what's going to encourage them to actually spend. For a hardcover right now is about $30. There are a lot of book buyers out there, but they have choices. There are hundreds of thousands of books that are being published. So you kind of have to get into the psyche of the book buyer when I'm talking about knowing your audience. So as you're writing, oftentimes you're thinking about, what is it that I want to share? What is it that's coming out of me? But you also have to think about, okay, what is it that they want from me? I compare sometimes to being a DJ. You can have all kinds of music and you could be playing all kinds of music, but if the people aren't dancing, I don't know how well that's working. So you have to, it's a dance between you and the audience, knowing what they want from you and being able to deliver that. And really, you got to know who they are. So that's one big thing. And knowing who they are will help the publisher help you get to them. So if you don't have a sense of who they are, what kind of magazines they read, what kind of online spaces they're in, what colors they like, you would say, what colors? Yeah, because colors make a difference on book covers. You really have to know the profile of your reader. The other thing that I think that is important, and it's kind of sad to some extent, but it's just kind of the reality of publishing and business these days. You have to either have a budget or have people who are you can barter with, or people who are going to support you. I always say, tell my authors, do you have any folks who can be a benefactor for you? And what I mean by that is, just to get out into the world. Since the pandemic, doing virtual tours, they work, but people now want to be in front of you. They want to talk to you. They want to have conversation. They want to feel like they're fully engaged, and that costs money. And oftentimes the publishers, they aren't investing in the book tour anymore. Part of the reason is because, going back to audience, if I live in New York and I've never been to Chicago, how am I going to show a publisher that I have an audience there? I'm going to show up at an event and there might be 5 people in the room. But if I know who my audience is in Chicago and I've already been in community with them, I can showcase to the publisher, listen, I already know that there are 500 people in Chicago who have been following me and are in community with me. So I think that it's important to really, again, have a sense of who your audience is, have a little bit of a budget, because it does cost money to make this thing work.
Yeah, it's real and it's important to know. And the thing is, if you know, then you can be prepared, right? Start your publicity budget, your travel budget, whatever that might look like. One of the things that I'm so impressed with the work that you do, Regina, is just how many different initiatives you've been a part of over the years that support multiple BIPOC authors, agents. It seems like you're always in the mix. And I'm just wondering if you might just speak in general about where are BIPOC authors today in terms of how the publishing industry really treats them, where they stand post George Floyd. Do BIPOC authors still need to think of themselves as endangered species? Should they just think of yourself as an author and go, go, go? Just what's your sense of the positionality of BIPOC authors today in 2025?
I'm going to come at this from a couple of different angles. During the George Floyd era, there were agents, editors, publishing professionals that were super aggressive about wanting to find books to get out into the world. Some who had never worked with BIPOC authors before, but they realized that there was seemingly a thirst for those books. And whenever anyone enters a market and they don't really understand the market, similar to what I was saying the authors need to do, when they don't understand who the audience is, they don't know how to reach the audience, they don't understand the communication strategies, how to engage. What happens is you have this book, but you don't really know what to do with it. And a number of agents who had not been in this space, they kind of hurried to find some folks. They didn't know what was quality, what wasn't quality. They didn't know if the content was really speaking to the audience, but the publishers bought those books. And I would say a number of them didn't really work. And some of them didn't work because they just weren't the right books. Some of them didn't work because the publishers didn't know what to do with them. Some of them didn't work because the publishers didn't have the infrastructure and the know-how inside the publishing house to get it out into the world. And some of them didn't work because they didn't know, okay, I can spend $1 million on this book, but I also have to invest in the publicity and marketing to get those books out into the world. They aren't just going to find their home. And so it was kind of a full ecosystem fail. When that happens, like any business, when it feels like, okay, we tried that and it didn't quite work, they don't necessarily go back and do a postmortem on why it didn't work. They're like, okay, we have to keep things moving and we have to think about our bottom line. And that's kind of where we are right now. And it doesn't mean that quality writing and quality authors can't get published. I'm seeing it happen every day. But publishing, even though it typically moves slow, they do pivot quite fast. And they pivot based on what they think is trending. Like right now, everything is about romantasy, love and some romantasy. And next year it'll be something else. We were hoping that Black books weren't going to be a trend. And I don't see it as a trend, but getting books published in the way that it was happening 3 years ago is definitely not where we are right now. And again, it doesn't mean that if you have a quality book that you can't get your book published, because I'm seeing it happen. It's just not happening in the same way that it was. And I'm actually happy about that, because when publishers, when they don't think about publishing in a smart way and a strategic way, it makes it bad for everyone. Because, you know, the way the business works is it's all about comps. So if your comps are not great and the publisher is saying, oh, well, what is this book like? And you have these 3 other books that were out in the marketplace that kind of are similar to your book, but they didn't invest it in the same way or in the correct way, then you're comparing your book to books that weren't kind of set up properly. And the publisher is looking at yours as though, okay, well, this market didn't quite work, or these kind of books didn't quite work. And it doesn't have anything to do with your book, but it's kind of the way we work as a business. There's some movement on that, though. There are some publishers who are moving away from comps altogether, which I'm so excited about. They're looking at data instead of comps. Metadata, if there's an audience for a topic, whether it worked in the past or it didn't work, they're looking at what's driving what people are talking about. And so this is one of the ways that technology is actually working for us. Before, publishers were working on instinct and intuition. And again, if you aren't embedded in this space and you know kind of the community, it's hard to have instinct and intuition about a space you're not familiar with. But now you can use metadata and data to drive decisions as well. So they call it acquisitions by data.
That is so interesting. That's really good information. So I want to talk about another initiative that you're part of, which is this new Black bestsellers list. It's a joint effort. I know Troy Johnson's
AALBC.
Talk to us about the Black bestseller list and what it is and why it's being created.
Sure. You know, whenever anyone is in the process of writing a book and you ask them what their motivation is and what their vision is and what would be kind of their definition of success, oftentimes, I would say 90% of my authors come in saying, I want to be a New York Times bestseller. So little do they often know is that the New York Times bestsellers list is not about necessarily the bestseller. It's editorial, meaning that there's a group of people who make decisions. They'll look at what the sales are for sure. Sales are a function of it, but it's not just that. It's also editorial. And more importantly, they create a database, so to speak, of booksellers. And that list of booksellers report into the New York Times. And the list changes here and there. I could sell 10,000 copies of a book, but if those books are not sold through New York Times reporting booksellers, the New York Times does not consider my book amongst that. And so it's very frustrating for a lot of authors. And then there's the USA Today list, and there's a number of other lists. But one of the things that we found as Black authors is that we want kind of hard data, right? And there's a company called Circana, and Circana has a platform called BookScan. And BookScan will report the number of books sold every week. And we're using BookScan to power the Black bestsellers list. And it's straight numbers. It's not editorial at all. So it's not a group of people getting together and saying, oh, there was 4 books that all sold 3,000 copies, and so let's pick one of them. No. If those 3 books sold 3,000 copies and that makes them a part of the top 10, they will be on the list. So it's all numbers driven. And there are a number of reasons that we created this. The organization is called the Black Book Accelerator. And the Black Book Bestsellers list is just one of the initiatives that we're using to help drive discoverability for authors and Black books in particular. We're going to be doing a lot of other things. We're going to have an incubator for Black authors to help them understand some of the kind of the nuts and bolts of what's happening behind the scenes so that they can understand from a business perspective how to get their book out into the world. So the Black Bestsellers list is really about a discoverability. It's really a marketing tool to help authors get their book out in the world and for other people to understand that these books exist, because oftentimes our books are selling sometimes way better than the books that are on the New York Times bestsellers list. And we don't need that list to prove our worth.
So the Black bestsellers list, for example, you might say like, oh, I'm number 3 on the Black bestsellers list, or my book is on the top 10 of the Black bestsellers list. So we want to create this kind of parallel bestseller list that ranks Black author books so that they can see how they're charting. And it's almost like social proof as well to say like, I mean, you could, like you said, USA Today bestseller, Black bestseller, like it becomes another one of these lists that people can actually see. And I know that more and more people are really recognizing that the New York Times is not an actual merit-based list.
And in addition, a number of outlets have stopped doing reviews. And so how do you find out about books? There have been so many like incredible books that have been published and you don't get to find out about them. You know, when I think about like the NAACP Image Awards, a lot of books get sent to them, but they only pick, I think, 5 per category. And I always look to that list to see, oh, okay, what seems to be the big ones for this year? But we're going to do a monthly list. And so people are going to get a chance to see what gets published month after month and what seems to be rising and people are interested in. And a number of people, organizations, and people who are interested in Black books, they don't know how to find some of the best Black books that are happening on a monthly basis. Troy's list is incredible, and he does a great job of curating and making sure that people know as much as possible about the Black books that are being published. But this list is ideally, the goal is to get it out into more spaces. And the people who are a part of it, Linda Duggins, she's a former publicist for Hachette. Myself, we have Peter Hildick Smith. He owns a company called Codex, which does a lot of data in the publishing industry. And then we have Troy, who has for several decades worked in the Black book space, making sure that people know what Black books exist. And Brian Hurley, he's a publisher now. And Carrie Bloxham, she's now the HR head at Hachette. And our goal is just to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to support Black authors and to make sure that they are feeling success and that people understand the success that they have in the world. And right now, there isn't a strong entity with a big reach to be able to do that.
I'm wondering if you think that BIPOC authors should find BIPOC agents. Do you think it's necessary to have an agent of color to represent you the best way?
I think, first of all, it's hard to get an agent. Sometimes it's harder to get an agent than it is to get a deal. I think BIPOC authors should work with the agents that they feel the most chemistry with and they feel are going to do best by their book and their topic. So it doesn't make sense for you to work with me if I'm not in your genre. Even though I would characterize myself as a successful agent, but if I'm not in alignment with the category that you're interested in, having me is not going to help you. So I think it's important that you work with the agent that is going to do best by your book. And I say book, but I really mean career, because it's important that when you're trying to identify an agent for you, that you're looking for someone who's going to stick with you throughout the life cycle of your career. I've had authors who have been with me from the beginning, and it really helps because I understand them, they understand me. I think it's important to have patience with your agent because just like I was saying, there's ebbs and flows in terms of what people are interested in. There's authors who get really frustrated by the idea that their book might not be selling at a given time. Oftentimes I'll say to my authors, listen, this topic is great, it's well written, but it's out of sequence. We need to work on something else that people are interested in right now. And I'm telling you that idea is going to circle back. So let's shelve that one for a second. But authors sometimes don't want to do that. I think it's important that when you're looking for an agent, you're looking for someone who's going to give you the best advice, not just on your one book, but on your entire career. And I think it's important also to be clear about what your expectations are of your agent, because not all agents do the same thing. And what I've found especially over the last couple of years, is that the expectations that authors have of their agent are not in alignment with the amount of work they want us to do and what we're being compensated for. Agents typically get a commission on what they sell. So if you're asking me to help you develop your book and I have to read it 3 or 4 times and give you editorial advice, that's really another gig. That's people get compensated for that. Now, a lot of agents will do that, but I think it's really important to have that conversation up front about how much editorial guidance the agent is going to give you. Some agents will help with publicity. Some agents will help with marketing ideas. Not all agents do that. It's important to really level set expectations up front, because people get upset because they're like, I need you to read my book. And I'm like, yep, I'm reading your book for the 5th time, So, and you got to think about, honestly, how long it takes to read a book. And all of that time is not being compensated for. So I just think it's important as you're trying to find an agent, whether that person be BIPOC or not, that you really speak to what your expectations are. Now, of course, I will be happy if folks do find a BIPOC agent, because I'd like to see more BIPOC agents in the business and having sustainable careers. So we want the best. And we would prefer that the best work with us and not with the big agencies per se. But from a purely business perspective, I think it's important that you find the best agent for you.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, so helpful for us to hear, what is the agent thinking? Like, I've been in this business for a very long time, and I don't think I've ever stopped to think like, yeah, people get paid to be a developmental editor. And if you ask somebody to read the book 3 times, the manuscript 3 times, like that's cost even more money. And we're asking our agents, what do you mean you haven't read it 3 times? Like, what do you mean you haven't? It's true. And again, I think writers, we really have to be cognizant of what we're really asking our agents to do, right? We think it's just their job. But think about, like you said, the way the business model is, when agents actually get paid, how much they're getting paid. So yeah, it's super helpful to hear your side of it and really, what we as writers are asking our agents to do. So thank you for sharing that perspective. All right, I'm going to let you go with one last question, which is, what's the last book that you read and loved?
Because I read for a living, I'm always reading. The book that I keep reading over and over again, and I say reading, and I'm going to put that in quotes because I'm really big on the audiobook these days. And I'll read a book in print, and then I was like, I got to read the audio. And so I've been reading a book called Concrete Dreamland by Patrick Dower. And the book is incredible. I've also been reading, when I say reading, because I read the book multiple times in the print version as the book was being developed, but I didn't hear it, is Will Packer's book, Who Better Than You? And on the children's book side, there's an incredible book that's coming out soon, and it's called The Incredibly Human Henson Blaze. It's a middle grade book by my author, Derek Barnes. He's been with me for 23 years. So excited about that book, and people are really excited about that book. And I had to read that one again because they made a number of editorial changes, and he's been working on that book for probably about 4 years. So I've read multiple versions of it. But yeah, those are a few. But like I said, I'm constantly reading books and getting excited about them.
Well, I'm going to put all 3 of those books in the show notes so people can also read them and enjoy them. I really wanted to read Will Packer's book, so thank you for reminding me.
Oh, the audio is incredible.
All right. I might listen to it. I actually have never listened to an audiobook, but I'm going to try it. That actually might be a good one to start.
Can I just say that in terms of sales, especially of BIPOC authors, in some cases, the sales of the print version and the audio version are 1-to-1. And in some cases, it's 60% audio and 40% print. And part of that is because people have started to get used to the long form podcast. So they're used to listening for longer periods of time. And people are busy. It's a busy time, and it's hard to sit down and actually put your eyes to a book. But you can wash dishes, you can do other things and listen to a book. So we're really leaning in on the audiobook, and publishers are investing heavily in it. And they're also investing in audio originals. So if you have a book that you think would work well as an original audio, that's an area that you can encourage your agent to try to pitch for as well.
Oh, look at this. Gems to the end. Thank you so much, Regina. Can you tell people how they can find you on the internet, social media, website? Where do you suggest people if they wanted to connect with you or your agency in some way?
My social media handle is at Serendipity Lit on all the platforms, whether that's Blue Sky, Instagram, and the others. And my website is www.serendipitylit.com. And if you go to my website and you fill out the Contact Us form, that comes directly to me. And I look forward to hearing from you all. And yeah, happy writing.
Thank you so much, Regina. This has been such a wonderful conversation. And I know that you have given everybody listening lots of wonderful advice and information and things to look forward to. So thank you so much for everything you do in the literary world. Okay, people, was that not a masterclass right there? Don't you feel a little bit smarter, maybe a whole lot more knowledgeable about the writing game? Regina Brooks is the real deal, and I really hope you enjoyed that conversation, and I hope that you felt that it gave you more insight and inspiration, the things that you need to optimize your writing career. And I really hope that Regina's tips and advice make you feel a lot more equipped to navigate the publishing industry with confidence. Most of all, writers, I hope you have a better, more realistic idea about the role of agents in the literary ecosystem so that you feel really confident and empowered to find the perfect literary agent for you. Okay, writers, if you want even more advice, information, and inspiration for your writing life, you only have to do one thing. And that one thing is bop on over to the Read, Write, and Create website at readwriteandcreate.com. And we know that's REED, writeandcreate.com. On the website, you'll find our blog, you'll find the show notes for the podcast, you'll find resources for your writing life, links to our monthly newsletter, links to learn more about our community for BIPOC women writers called The Sanctuary, links to our social media handles, including my fun new YouTube channel. That's right. Everything that you need to optimize and enjoy your writing life is in one easy place for you to tap into with all the delicious literary resources you need. readwriteandcreate.com. That's all you got to remember. Now, before I let you go, I know you might be thinking, Lori, I love this podcast so much. What can I do to support you? Well, I'm glad you asked. There's two things you can do. One, if you feel like making a small monetary donation for the podcast to help me defray the cost of producing it, you just need to go to the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes and you can make a small donation there. Every little bit helps and I appreciate it so much. The other option you have to support the show is you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Now, if you really think about it, leaving a review is actually a win-win situation because if you leave the show a review, then more people find out about the show, more people can feel confident that they should listen to it if it has a great review and a great rating. And you win because you get to practice your reviewing skills. You'll be a published reviewer if you leave me a review on Apple Podcasts. So those are two ways you can help support me and support this show. A donation or a review on Apple Podcasts. So whatever support you have, I appreciate it. Even if you can just send good vibes. I love good vibes. Whatever you do, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. The Read, Write, and Create podcast is written and produced by me, Lori L. Tharps. Our editor is Brad Linder, and our theme music is by Wataboy. Until next week, writers, keep writing. The world needs more BIPOC stories written by BIPOC storytellers just like you.